episode of REDtalks.live. I am your host, Nathan Pierce, and I'm coming to you in yet another Christmas sweater edition. Check out the cool one my wife got me. Pretty rad, can't go wrong with Star Wars, right? This episode's number 40. Isn't that cool? And speaking of significant numbers, I like a big round number like 40. Like pretend I'm still 40. I'm just past 40. Also, we're only about 170 views away from 20,000 for this YouTube station. So that's a pretty big deal as well. So I thought for this episode I'd do something different, not just wear a Yoda sweater. Also just do a review of what's been going on for the year. So most recently, I'll start at the end of the year. I'm actually coming to you from paternity leave right now. So you might notice I'm speaking a lot quieter than I normally do on this show. That's because I have a 16-day-old son sleeping out there and I wouldn't dare get above a certain volume right now. So it's been pretty cool. Taking a little bit of time off with my wife to kind of get to know him. And it's given me a lot of time to reflect, and maybe I'm just becoming a little more sentimental about just what's REDtalks.live meant and been about this year, and what's it going to mean in the future. So let's just do a quick recap of kind of what happened in 2018. We started the year with just how to get started with Super NetOps. So Super NetOps is that free online network automation for DevOps training program, and that all started. I mean, I've got to give a quick shout out to John Giacomoni, who was my boss at the time. He gave me an objective to reboot programmability publicly and to get people reinvigorated about all the APIs and programmability capabilities that F5's technology had. So thanks to John sent me out looking at how to do that. I tried a whole bunch of things, written format, video format, code sharing. Turned out a combination of those things was just right, mainly code sharing and a bit of video commentary. And here we are with Super NetOps. It's a huge success now. Many thousands of people have gone through that training, which is excellent news. So kind of cool. I started the year with just how do you take that first step? What is an API? How do you understand what REST is? And some pointers and tips in that one. Since then, I'm looking across the screen notes because so much has happened. After that, actually, we had some guys on from Aspen Mesh, F5 Incubator Aspen Mesh. They're making enterprise grade services based on Istio service mesh, which is kind of cool. We had both Andrew Jenkins and Niraj Potter on. Andrew talked to us about how to run Minikube, which is a single node Kubernetes install inside of a Docker namespace. Now, that's not like a namespace in a namespace. That's really handy if you want a quick kind of disposable test dev environment. You can spin it up, work away, delete. It's like it was never there because it's inside of a container. So Kubernetes in Docker. Really cool solution, Andrew. I immediately installed that and have been using it since. And then we had Niraj on, and Niraj, this was crazy cool. He worked out how to do service tracing on AWS, but had to get around a feature on AWS where it'll strip out headers you inject for tracing. So he worked out a way of actually replacing the stripped out header back in again between each hop. Anyway, he wrote a blog on that. It's on Aspen Mesh's website. Really cool solution. So those Aspen Mesh guys are doing a fantastic job. They're solving problems that like anyone who's looking at ACO is going to come up against at some point. So fantastic to have the Aspen Mesh guys on. We also had another great guest, Jason Edelman, who's the co-founder of Network to Code, a company that teaches network engineers how to do automation and orchestration of networking technology. Really cool company. They also teach F5 automation, among other networking companies. Anyway, he and Matt Oswalt and Scott Lowe released a book called, and I wrote this down, Network Programmability and Automation. So we had Jason Edelman on the show to talk a little bit about his book. So that was pretty cool. A book launch on REDtalks.live. Every year something new for you guys. After that, we went back to the technology for a little while. I released a couple of free open source solutions. The first one was something I'd been working on for a while. It started out as just experimenting with like Ansible Tower and how it can pull source from a repository. It can pull the playbooks down before it runs them. Thought that was a pretty cool idea. That, after kicking the tires a bit with that and experimenting, that turned into Network configuration as code. So I wrote a GitHub webhook server that you install in your big IP, and suddenly you can just check configurations into a repository and they magically turn into big IP configurations, fully automated. So that's been a really fun project. I've made some great friends at GitHub along the way. In fact, one of our episodes was with Christian Weber of GitHub. He came on to talk about the importance of configuration as code. And there was a quote, I'm going to read this out to make sure I get it right. When we talked about using code repositories and like developer tooling for managing infrastructure, the value there is being able to recover from a failure without relying on a failure state as a means of recovery. There's some wise words. Christian said that on an episode earlier this year. I've been asking a lot of people since he said that, like, what is the most common cause for a major outage? And they've kind of agreed exactly with what Christian said. It's usually while troubleshooting a minor outage. Configuration as code, that helps you get away from that, working out how to get to a good state from a failed state. Instead, what you do is just reapply the known good state, and the failed state never existed. So some really cool stuff we learned from there. I also presented that solution at GitHub Universe in October. That was called in the GitHub Universe demo desk. It was live streamed. They get many thousands of views on that one. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking, live streaming a live demo. But anyway, that's up on the GitHub Universe website. So that was cool. The GitHub webhook has been getting a lot of attention. But what logically followed that webhook was, well, now I'm automating the way I can push my configurations out. I need the second step, which is how do I find out how it's running or if it's running and what's going on. So the second thing, shortly after releasing the GitHub integration, the webhook server, I then started a second open source project called BigStats. Now, BigStats is a telemetry export. So it will collect data and statistics off of the big IP around VIPs, around pool members, around SSL was the last feature I released just yesterday, and it will send them back into your organization's telemetry pipeline. Now, a lot of companies out there, they create their own dashboards, etc., but then you got to log into each device to look at their dashboard, and that doesn't scale. So companies are starting to create telemetry pipelines, and it's the responsibility of all the vendors to populate the pipeline with valuable data. So that's what BigStats is all about. It can talk to a Kafka message bus, to StatsD or Graphite DB, which produces lovely Grafana dashboards, which was the third solution I then released this year, was a Grafana dashboard template, which is on the Grafana community website. And that allows you to take all that telemetry BigStats has found in the big IP and turn it into those beautiful Grafana dashboards. So with a combination of the GitHub webhook server to push policy and manage policy for the big IPs, BigStats to pull that rich data out and send it into a telemetry pipeline, and then the Grafana dashboard to make sense of that and make it all pretty, we think we got a kind of a cool solution right now. So I'll to put some links in this episode to show where to kind of read about those things. A little different from these episodes, those technology ones, and this one was real important to me, actually. I like this. I had a colleague from F5 come on, Vinny Mazza. Now, Vinny, if I recall correctly, is down in Florida. He's one of our consultants. He goes and does implementations. He has to make tricky things work. He saw all this automation orchestration business coming and thought, you know what, I need to learn this. He was a network person like the rest of us, forced into GUIs and CLIs most of our lives. So Vinny created an out-of-work project of his own for his local community, helping a local training center for the police force, in fact. And he actually learned Python to automate one of their targeting solutions for the police officers. And then he learned Python and he got to a certain point where he couldn't get it to work as responsively and he needed to go from asynchronous to synchronous. So then he went and learned JavaScript and now he knows like Node.js really well. And there's a whole episode on just his journey and how he found it really useful to find inspiration for something local that was personal to him that he could then invest his energy in. And that actually taught him a lot of the skills he's now using in the workplace. So that was a great episode. I really enjoyed. So big shout out to Vinny Mazza as well. It'd be cool to have you on again to see how you've evolved that solution. It's been a few months. then we're catching up to the present now, like the episodes 37 and 38 were just updates to the Grafana dashboard. I just mentioned SSL, adding SSL statistics to Big Stats, the telemetry exporter. And then just released a new version of the GitHub webhook that can do config validation before you commit to the production branch. So that's a useful feature a lot of people ask for. They want to be able to commit a service definition and just have it check that it would have worked before it then goes to production. So you can do a commit to a test branch, which will validate, and then you merge the test branch to production branch and it goes live. So that's a useful feature. A lot of people like that one. That's pretty much everything. And now we're at episode 40. Wow, what a year. Two open source projects, a third if you count the template. Not really. It's only two. A child, kind of thought I still was one. Now I've got one to look after. That's a bit scary, but we're doing all right, we think. And almost 20,000 views on REDtalks.live. So thanks to you, thanks listeners for keeping me motivated, keeping me inspired. I'd love to hear from people what they think about what's going on, or just their own experiences. The feedback against the two open source projects. I mean, every feature in there has pretty much come from a customer saying, why doesn't it do this? Then it does. So to keep talking, keep listening, and yeah, well, you've been listening to Nathan Pierce. We're at the end of 2018. There's 4 days to go. It's been awesome. This sweater's awesome. Everything's awesome. Being a dad's awesome. And we look forward to bringing you some really cool things in 2019. So thanks for listening so far. And thanks for tuning in again in the future and sticking with us. We hope to come up with some more really cool things. Anyway, that's enough for REDtalks.live 2018. See you in 2019. Thanks for listening.